Hi, everybody. This is Maggie Barr. I'm here from SLV News and Events. And this is part of our webinar series on how to help folks affected by the CZU fire in the San Lorenzo Valley and Bonnie Doon areas. This webinar series is chock full of information about solving difficult problems that you might run into as you wade through all the challenges of the aftermath of the fire. And today's call is about rebuilding. It's a Zoom call with a couple of architects that have been working in the Santa Cruz area for many years. And they're going to go through the steps it takes to get your home rebuilt. The speakers are going to be Timerie Gordon and Christian Nielsen from Nielsen Studios in Santa Cruz. They do architecture and home design, and they have clients that they're working with right now in this situation. Where they're considering the rebuilding process and everything that goes into it, including the scope, the schedule, the costs, and dealing with the county. They actually have been talking to the county a lot lately about what the county is going to do to make things easier for fire victims as well. So I'm happy to have you guys on the call. If you're listening, please put your questions in the Q&A window. And then the chat window, you'll find a handout, a website you can go to right now to click on that link, and it'll be some of the notes that Timerie put together for you folks as we go through this content. So kind of a table of contents plus favorite links. And in the meantime, if you have questions, just put them in the Q&A. We are going to try to hold most of the questions to the end of the call, to like the last 10 to 15 minutes. So just put your questions in there. You can even upvote questions. If you see a question that resonates with you that you'd also like to hear more from, you can upvote it, help us prioritize a little bit. So, Timerie, did you want to do a screen share to get started, to put your handout up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I have you set up as a panelist, so you should be able to do that. You can give that a try.
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay. Let me see how I can fix that. I'll go to participants, to your contact, and make host. I think that might work. Actually, I think that'll end the recording. So maybe I can pull it up. Do you want me to do that? Let me do it. Mm-hmm. I know last time we switched the hosts, it kills the recording. I don't know really how to. I'm still learning how to do these Zoom webinars, but I did pull it up, so I'm going to go ahead and share that next. Let's see what I got.
While you're sharing that, we'll go ahead and just say that this document is what we have found is that there's a lot of information. The county has been working tirelessly to put as much information out there as possible, but it does require some digging. And so we found that we're used to doing this digging. This is just part of the type of work that we do. And so we pulled a lot of different information into one document that then basically will send you to the specific locations as it's applicable to you. And so we've been working on this document since, pretty much quickly after the fire and information started coming out. So the beginning of this document, it says steps, but there's multiple things happening simultaneously, as any of you that have been in this, environment now and are working through this know. So also the first steps on all of this are things that you've probably already gone through. So I think we're going to focus today on not necessarily the beginning part of this document, but we'll go in. I think it's most useful if we go into some of the more critical path concerns right now, which are, I think, erosion control and how phase 1 cleanup's happening, how phase 2 cleanup's happening, what information is out there for that, and then consultants that you're going to need along the way to be doing rebuilding, and how you might be able to coordinate those or move forward with those, and then just other things that we've learned along the way in terms of those specific details.
And you covered the first part in your first webinar too. I don't know if everyone knows on the Zoom that we you did a part one and this is part two. So
Right.
you covered a lot of this. You covered the most of step one, right?
Right. And step two, I mean, these initial steps. I mean, step two, the temporary housing, we should just say, the reason why it is early on in this document is that the county is recommending that if you plan on doing it on living on your house property temporarily, there is a process that and an application that they would like for you to fill out. I mean, I think we all know, being up in any of these areas, people are already doing it. So there's that. But the county has put together a process in order to formalize that. And so it's here as an early on thing, because they wanted people to start that process early, because in their minds, you're filling out an application and then you're getting kind of signed off from environmental health that some of these things are taken care of and that your property is safe. But again, I think we all either know people or have been up there and we've seen that people are already taking matters into their own hands, just like they did saving their home. So, that's just the nature of things. So, so step two, we're not, I mean, we can talk about specific details of temporary housing at the end if people have specific questions, but I think we won't spend a lot of time going through temporary housing.
Oh, and before I almost forgot to introduce Wendy Harris, who's on the panel here with us. Say hi, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
And Wendy's on the team with me at Keller Williams on the Maggie Bar team, and she's also co-host of San Lorenzo Valley News and Events, and she's here to go through the Q&As as they come up and help with feeding the questions to you guys.
Okay, great.
So you don't have to man that while you're speaking at the same time. So she'll help.
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
So calamity, I believe probably a lot of you have already gone through that process too. So we can, but the links are all there to where you need to be and all live. The step 4, obtaining building permits. The records, there's a link there if you need to, or if you haven't tried to obtain existing information on your property, this is the place to do that. If there's past permits, they may have drawings, they may have soils reports, they may have nothing, but it's a good place to start to see what actually does exist for your property. So
I would also add to that obtaining any records that the assessor has, that would be a good thing to do as well. That's through the assessor's office. You can obtain those records. They may have different records than the building department has.
Right.
So it's good to get those as well, just so you have all the information, all potential information of what was on that property.
Another thing that's on this that comes up later, but is sort of backtracking and fact checking your property, is what environmental health has on record for your property as well, because that directly relates to your septic and your septic system capacity, which may come into play if you want to do anything different to your property than what was there before, like intensifying the use of your property with an ADU or an additional bedroom. So also, basically you want to just gather all the information that you can about your property that exists. So that would be assessor's office through this records and environmental health records. You can check environmental health if you go to, there's a link later, but you can go into the environmental health website and put in your APN number and actually get that information directly online as well. So yeah, right here, it says visit the EHS website. So if you go in there, you'll be able to dig in there and get your information about your septic. So we want to dive into site one. So many of you may know or have read that site one cleanup started, phase one cleanup started today. And even since we put this document together, which I think the most recent update was yesterday morning, because we did another presentation yesterday, the county has just posted on their Facebook page some information about a map that they're that they're going to, you'll have access to, I think, in the next week. And basically, if there is a white icon on your property, your phase 1 cleanup has been completed. And at that point, theoretically speaking, which was the phone call I was on when this started, is that phase 2 cleanup could theoretically happen at that time. You can move forward. The issue is that our county does not have a landfill acceptance agreement for this debris currently. So I was just on the phone with a private demolition company here locally. And he said that they would be ready to go, but they have no place to take the debris. And because it's a contaminant, there needs to be a certain amount, like a certain arrangements for where they're taking this material. We don't have that at this moment. So that puts people in a little bit of a holding pattern. That being said, we do have relationships with Bruce McPherson's office and Ryan Coonerty's office. And now that I know that this is our roadblock, then after I'm off this call, my next call will be about that particular, sort of just giving them a heads up, because tomorrow there's a supervisors meeting. And, if this is, the holdup, we kind of need to figure out what's the game plan for that, because I'm sure everybody on this call is anxious to move forward and have that information.
Did that map on the Facebook page, did that map include any kind of schedule? Did it show how they were going to go about cleaning phase 1?
What the map is, well, I can actually I'll try and put the link to that map on here so people can look at it.
There's this link here for phase 2. That's something else. There's not.
Yeah,
that's something different. It's not in this document because they just posted it like
today
in the last couple hours.
Yeah, if you share it with me, I'll
go ahead. Sorry, I'm just pulling up that link. So.
Thank you.
So that's kind of phase 1, phase 2, sort of overview. The thing about phase 2 is that people have probably read is that there's a kind of FEMA subsidized cleanup that can happen, or you can hire a private service. And there is, basically the free service is going to be, it's going to cost whatever it's going to cost. I don't know how they're going to do this accounting, but basically the theory is that if you have insurance money left over, and it went above and beyond.
Well, if you have insurance money allocated towards, if you have allocated insurance towards cleanup, then the county will request or require that money.
But if the cleanup is $40,000 and you only have 20, the county is basically covering that. So if you're basically insured properly for site cleanup, then you can move forward privately, and your insurance is covering it. If it seems like you have a deficiency in that dollar amount and you don't want to pay that out in your own cash, then you could take advantage of this FEMA cleanup. The information that I got from Ryan Coonerty's office just this weekend was that the FEMA site cleanup for phase 2 is not going to move nearly as quickly as private, and may not even be able to happen before winter. So if you're in a hurry and you have the ability to move forward with phase 2 cleanup to kind of get the ball rolling on your property and you want to do that, then private is probably the way to go on that. If you
And even if you do the private though, can you still, after your insurance paid part of it, go back to the county or only use the county? Yeah. Okay. So you
No.
can't use the
Yeah.
county funds to do a private cleanup, basically.
No.
No, if you do private and your insurance doesn't fully cover it, then you'd be out of pocket.
What about FEMA? Because FEMA is supposed to cover.
Well, I mean, I think if you're doing, I mean, that's kind of this sort of out of our realm, but maybe if you're applying for FEMA separately, privately, you know, in that application process,
Yeah,
that
maybe
might
there's a
be
way to do
possible
that.
to do that.
Mhm.
So,
Right. Okay.
um,
Who are the companies that do cleanup? I'm just thinking out loud here. Is it the usual suspects that do like the Serpros and whatnot that do cleanup inside the house, or different people?
We actually got we in our talk yesterday we got information that ServPro will not be doing phase 2.
Mhm.
That's beyond their scope of services. I mean, do we have?
I'm putting.
Maybe the county has a list or something. I'm just curious.
There is, and they're going to need to be. I'm just going to put in the comments here one recommendation. I mean, he's the one that we are familiar with and that I just got off the phone with.
Thank you.
Who was, and he's been doing business here for 40 years.
Mhm.
So, but I think that on one of these links in here will take you to a list of private services on the environmental health, because they do have to have a particular
License or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the county website. This is a link that you did include in section 2. Talks about ash cleanup, landscape and watershed.
Phase 2, if you go under phase 2, there's a link on that second thing, and I think that says you must have an approved plan before you can proceed with the fair debris removal. And then if you go to that link, I think that'll get you close to the approved consultants.
But Maggie, you're not sharing the document anymore. On your screen is the.
Oh, okay. I
You
think
don't have that up currently.
all you can see is this one here. So let me fix that real quick here. Let's see here. Share and then reshare that screen. I think it'll be this one here. Share. And that way it'll share everything that I have on my screen. So there's this document, and then this is the county website.
Oh, okay, got it.
So on the county website, it looks like it's cleanup, landscape, erosion control. It has ash cleanup, landscape, and watershed. And then home, news, debris removal, maps and data. So maybe under debris removal or, okay.
So there's a lot. There's a lot of information on the environmental health website. These 3 links right here.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of information.
Yeah,
there.
and we took some of the most pertinent and put it in this document, but everything goes. I mean, again, this is the environmental health component, but there's it's going all over the place. So this document is really just a starting point. And just if you want to just stay on this page really quickly, because this is an important component to clean up, which is the RCD. Go down a little bit further.
Zoom it out a little bit so I can see more of the page.
So that where it says upcoming events right here, the RCD, Resource Conservation District, and again, many of you may have already been familiar with this because they did these 4 classes, but if not, they have recordings. If you go to their website specifically, they will have these 4 recordings based on erosion control and your property site management in terms of debris. Also, there's an application process on there, and they will come and make a confidential site visit to talk to you specifically about your property. And so, for instance, tomorrow we'll be up at the Braymore neighborhood. They're coming up and sort of walking through the whole neighborhood collectively to sort of kind of hit a bunch of neighbors with the information that they need about their properties and what needs to happen in terms of erosion and and starting that process, because it's not too soon to do that. There again is a FEMA sort of free aspect to this potentially, but also there's not really a clear timeline on how that's going to be managed. They're going to be tackling the most dangerous areas that are going to, as I'm sure we're talking, I mean, just for instance, we're talking about the Braemar, which is all the way at the top here. And then there's like, miles down into the valley. And so they're going to be, probably tackling the most, compromised areas that would, impact the most amount of neighbors in terms of landslide and whatnot. So anyway, this super important resource, go to their website, Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz County. I actually heard
there. I just put it in there in the chat window. Hope everybody can see that okay. And actually those webinars are on the SLV News and Events event page.
Okay.
On all of those links are included, just like the links for the Zoom. So
I also heard that they're set up. They have a table set up today at Wild Roots.
Okay, I'll make a note of that too.
I mean, you might want to fact check me, but
yeah,
I think that's what I saw. So they really like got out in front of this in terms of communication, and are really working hard to communicate with the community on what needs to happen. So go ahead.
It looks like there's an RSV down here, rcdsantacruz.org.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
I think
Great.
the next thing would be geologic hazard.
Right.
Since we're talking about erosion.
Okay.
So do you want to go stay on that page, or do you want to go back to?
Actually, well, why don't we hit? Well, let's go back to. Okay, where are we on that? Yeah. So let's scroll down.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a flow chart on the. So the county did provide a flow chart for debris removal. Just going back to debris removal real quick. This is a flow chart that just kind of shows how property owners will go through that process. It's a good infographic, and I think it kind of spells it out fairly well. So so then we can continue to scroll down. Maybe we should just talk about. We can do the septic, septic wells, and water systems. So just going, I mean, kind of going back to one of the first things we were stating was about getting records for the property. For the septic systems, Maggie, go ahead and scroll up.
I think I went too far.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm getting my flow charts mixed up. This is the one you want.
So for people's septic systems, what's going to be really important is to know what environmental health has on record for the property. It is possible that the house that was there and in the size that it was may not have matched what environmental health has on record, because maybe it was added onto without permit over over some time, which kind of going back to that, planning is going to allow some of those things to go through and to be replaced as in kind, but kind of the deciding factor on some of these things is going to be environmental health and what your septic can handle. So if you're trying to reutilize your existing septic, maybe if it was damaged, but it can be repaired, you need to look at what the capacity of it is, so that when you do the rebuild, you make sure that you're rebuilding, or you have enough capacity to rebuild what you had. So that's really important to get that information from environmental health. And what we're seeing in terms of kind of the information we're getting is that the septic system is going to be the most complicated piece for most of these properties, because of just because of all different reasons. But it's whether the existing system was up to current standard, they're going to be looking at, and also then we get into discussions around engineered systems, which can get more complex in terms of the review process, because the county doesn't have At this moment right now, the county doesn't have the ability to do those reviews on their own. It has to go to a state level. So that just adds time and then, you know,
And
adds
money.
cost.
Right.
So that's like a very important piece to find out right away is what is the capacity of the existing septic? Is it suitable to be reused? And then kind of making decisions based on that. So that's a big question, I think,
Right.
for property owners as they start to go through the process. That's
And also like you have on here, you know, septic, a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't know until I became a real estate agent, that the capacity of the septic system is very finite. And so each septic system, wherever it may be, only has capacity for so many bedrooms and so many bathrooms. And that's how the county determines if your septic is big enough. So if you happen to have your house added on to once or twice, even if it happened 50 years ago, to the point where the septic system technically is not big enough, even though it's been working fine for you, it's just technically county-wise it's not big enough, then now you've got a challenge. You know, they're going to want you to expand it. And if there's not room to expand it, if it's on a slope, if it's by a creek, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not like it's impossible to rebuild your house because of septic problems, but it is something to dig into early on in the process to see what is the capacity. Like I said, I run into this a lot with real estate.
Right. Yeah. So that's why we really feel like that is, for some people, that is going to be truly like step one, is to figure out, get that information for the property.
Right. Along with all the other step ones,
Yeah,
which is
right.
cleaning and,
Yeah, all that.
and applying for this
But
and filling out that.
right. Yeah, all these
But
things.
also on that note, you'll see on here, it says, if you know where your septic is and leach fields are located, it would benefit you before phase 2 to mark those out, because even if you have drawings, they, you know, you know, you hand off construction drawings, let's say, to the demo company or something like that, it may differ. So just, especially with, you know, large equipment and whatnot out there, you just want to mark it off so that clearly, so that, and I would say contractors that we've talked to say, you know, really with phase 2, you want to try and be there. There's going to be people that are going to be, maybe there's rock walls, or there's landscaping or things that you want to save. And so the best way to make sure that what is, you know, that you salvage the things you want to salvage is by actually physically being there during the process.
Yeah, and the septic tanks, even though they're kind of buried, the lids are not necessarily, and the little drains or the vent pipes aren't necessarily buried. Those kind of stick up. So you don't want them to just come through and just chop that stuff up,
right,
not knowing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that, like it's possible the lids have burned. I mean, sometimes those are redwood caps on those, so those may have burned in the pipes that are the vent pipes coming out may have melted. But it would be good to do the best to identify those areas, just so that so they have understanding of where they exist. I mean, because as Timerie was saying, those, even if you had previous drawings or permit drawings that showed the septic and where it was, those get modified during construction all the time, so they don't always end up exactly where they're shown on the plan. So it's good to mark that stuff.
Great.
So in terms of inspection for septic and wells, I believe there are 2 paths you can take. You can call environmental health, and they can come out and do an inspection, or you can do that privately by calling one of the varieties of septic companies that, and you know, and that can come out and do flow rate and check that all out. It's probably not happening prior to, I'm guessing, a phase 2 cleanup, but I don't know. we don't actually know the
Yeah,
answer to that.
we don't know. But I mean, if
So-
you have, I mean, it is, I guess it would be possible if you were going to have a qualified professional inspect the septic, it's possible they could do it prior.
Maybe after phase one and between phase 1 and 2.
Right.
But you should just, they will tell you what they're willing to do and not do, what we found.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of went through the steps. If you want to just scroll down, I mean, step 6 was, or whatever we're calling it, number 6 is erosion control.
Geologic hazards.
Oh, right. Yeah. So
Should we go to erosion control or?
Yeah.
So a part of this is, again, this information has kind of been released to the community that they are doing geologic hazard assessment throughout the areas. And I believe that starting tomorrow, I think they're going to be doing a preliminary map and presentation, a presentation on a map that they've prepared that is actually, I think, accessible currently about the highest risk and danger areas for these. This is both with debris flow, but also with like deep disruption to the land, to the earth. And so under certain circumstances of those really high risk areas, I mean, the newest information is that nobody may be able to do anything with those properties until we get through the winter and manage what might be happening, but also may require a geological report, which is different than a soils report for those. So you may need to get a geologist involved in that, in the rebuild. And that's why this map is really critical, because that type of consultant adds one more layer of complication to a rebuild. So it's really important as people are evaluating what it's going to take to rebuild, just like septic, this part is also a really key factor. And not every property is going to have that same circumstance.
Right.
And so, so that's just an important thing. So the report, so they're supposedly supposed to be presenting it at the County Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow, or at least a preliminary report. And then I think we'll be hearing more information about that over the upcoming weeks on, what does that mean for everybody. So again, going back to
that, so if I understand you correctly, you're saying that anytime there's a fire and the vegetation is destroyed on a hillside, that could cause the soil to become unstable. And even with rain, it could be like they had in LA, they had lots of landslides, mudslides, that sort of thing. And that the county is trying to predict the areas that are the most vulnerable. And then if you're in that area, it will affect your rebuild schedule, because they have to make sure that your soil is stable.
Mm-hmm.
And you might even need to get your own geologist in there to demonstrate that you're not part of that area that's potentially going to slide. Is that what you're saying?
Or the geologist may be part of your team of consultants that provides guidance on how you can rebuild.
right.
So there may be things that need to happen, and they would work, and the geologist would work with the geotechnical engineer and the structural engineer to come up with a solution for foundation. It's probably mostly going to be a foundation issue. So making sure the foundations are stable.
Because I found this, my sister happens to work for the USGS, coincidentally, and so she sent me this cool link that I can share, and it's basically the USGS, not just here, but obviously anywhere there's a fire, right? They take a look at, and it's kind of, I wouldn't call it simple, but basically if there's a heavy slope and they know the condition of the soil to begin with, and then there's a fire, well, it's straightforward to some degree for them to estimate which lots are going to have more risk and less risk. And so this
Right.
is, the county is taking this raw data from USGS and helping homeowners decide if they're in a high risk area or not.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's going to be a lot case by case basis.
Probably not all. I mean,
Well, it's going to be, I
It's
mean,
area.
if your area is mapped, then that's something that you'll have to take into account.
right. I mean, I don't want to say lot by lot. I mean, theoretically, yes, but the thing is that the character of you and your neighbors are all very similar. So they're looking at doing kind of, and potentially, again, if you have to get a geologist involved in a particular area, I did read that they're looking at ways to kind of do entire sort of like neighborhood solutions to that rather than doing it lot by lot. And we'll get into that a little bit further in terms of like grouping resources. But so it's theoretically a lot by lot, but there also could be some circumstances that are sort of neighborhood consistent, so that everybody could use the same information rather than having to hire that person individually to do a report. They could do a neighborhood report.
I'm just going to put this link here, that USGS map that I had. So let me go back to our shared screen. Okay, good. All right.
So I just want to, just in turn, because we're talking about soils and we're going to be kind of getting into consultants and steps forward in that way. A geologist and a geotechnical, like there's a soils engineer and then there's a geologist, and they're both dealing with earth and soil and all similar things, but they're different. And so most people will have to have some form of a soils report done by a geotechnical engineer, but not necessarily need a geologist. So what we were just talking about is specifically addressing geologists. And now we're going to move into, most people are going to need a soils report. If you have a soils report on record, that's
Yep.
step 7. Yeah. So, or whatever, number 7, then you may be able to do an abbreviated soils report, and any soils engineer here locally is going to know when you're, when you're able to do it abbreviated or not. They've all been given the information at this point if they're actively practicing. And so that's kind of, that's going to be one consultant that you're going to need. And if you are in a neighborhood, we'll just use the Braemore neighborhood as an example. I mean, there's 40 homes that are going to be under these same circumstances. So in that instance, depending on what path you're taking in terms of rebuilding, there's an opportunity for you and your neighbors to join together collectively to hire a consultant for a discount, and that they can come and help all of you simultaneously. And if there's core drilling, for instance, that requires certain equipment, and that equipment is, there's not an abundance of that equipment. And so if they're up there with the tractor core drilling, they can core drill many. It saves time and money. And so we found that the consultants we're talking to are really open and happy to be working that way because it's efficient. This is going to get a little bit complicated, but it goes back to the septic. If you're looking to intensify the use of your property, or you really need to do an extreme septic shift or development, or whatever we're going to call it, modification, they also need soil samples and core samples. And so coordinating that engineer with your soils engineer is a really valuable thing, because then there's specific locations that the septic engineer is going to need, and that might not be the same place that a soils engineer might core drill. So there's a level of coordination there that should happen if you know you need to redesign your septic. And that's not something that you would, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things that that's not written anywhere on any website or anything, but they would, you know, it saves time and money. Again, you just do one core drilling, but it's just one of those things that doesn't always happen, unfortunately. So,
Well, also, I know with new developments, new houses, I know a tiny little bit about building new homes, and that the soil core, the coring sometimes has to happen during the winter. They want a winter's core, because where the water table is, as far as the septic is concerned, you know, you can't really tell this whether or not the septic will work there until we've had a heavy rain, like in January, February, March. I have a client who has to wait till, you know, the next heavy rain before they can even do their coring samples to tell them where the septic is going to go. Now that's with a brand new septic, of course. But do you think some of these folks that are going to have to move their septic system are going to be up against that challenge where they have to wait for the rains before they can do their core samples?
I'm not entirely sure about that, but I think the main thing here is that if you know that you have to redo your septic and you're going to be getting a soils report done, you know, anyway, it's just good to coordinate the consultants up front and have everybody communicating with each other so that it can be done most efficiently and effectively. So if it means they only need to get out there once to do the core sampling, and they are able to core in the multiple locations they need to do it on site, then that's great. If they need to come out to do a second one because they have to do it during, you know, the winter or during the wet season, that just may have to be that way. But I think what we're saying is, you know, you just want to make sure that you just try and coordinate as much upfront as possible to save time, and it does save money by doing that as well.
Okay.
And if there's a way to band with neighbors to be able to, you know, utilize the same consultants, that includes you know, geotechs, surveyors. Maggie, if you want to scroll down a little bit, we have, we talk about, there's soils report, there's surveys, then we have septic inspections and septic design. It's, you know, possibly even with septic, if you're able to utilize the same consultant throughout the neighborhood or in the neighborhood, that may help with saving time and money.
Right. So, and I mean, this section is about, you know, the permitting and the rebuilding process and, you know, the preparing your permit application for review. The county, if you're doing a like for like rebuild, the county's goal is a 5 to 7 day review process. And if anybody's been through this process, you know that is like
lightning fast.
Yeah. What that means though is it's a review process. That does not mean an approval process. That's a review process. And so you want to submit a package that is tight, that is exactly what they want it to be, and you will get through the process quickly. And so I didn't put this in here because we're licensed professionals. This came from their website. The county suggests to get a licensed qualified professionals to help you prepare and submit your package. And that would be the case. Obviously we're biased because that's what we do, but it does help. I mean, so much of the process that you've heard of people going through with the county and the difficulties has to do with the process prior to submittal or during submittal and plan check comments and all these extra comments. But it's the more work that you do up front to understand what needs to be done, the quicker that process is, whether you're doing like for like or different build. And so it's just, you know, it's really important to hire the right consultants and know when to cut costs and know when not to, because time is money. And so it's, you know, it's just an important, it's an important part of this process, because unlike people who get themselves into a building or a renovating process, everybody that's in this didn't choose to be here. And so you want to try and find ways to, minimize the pain as much as possible, and hiring the right consultants that have been through the process and can guide you is really a key factor in that. Go ahead.
I'm thinking that we've got about 15 minutes left. So I think maybe we could just like scroll, maybe we just scroll through this and we can just kind of briefly summarize some of these things.
Okay.
So this is just, and people can read this they can download the link and look at this document on their own, but we just kind of spell out some of the construction and inspections. That just talks about general contractors, and then, and then you can engage architects or designers, as you see fit. Let's see, other than getting into, we reviewed some of this in our last talk.
Right.
So other topics, but people can just, people can go through all this information on their own. And then Maggie, if you scroll down a little bit further, we get into something we didn't include last time, just cost to rebuild. So there's information there that just talks about general costs for rebuilding. These are kind of these are not,
it's a framework.
It's a framework. So it's just, it can be less, it could be more, but this is kind of what we see as kind of a general
average.
General average that we see. Then in terms of permit fee information, this is from the county website. So you'll see that basically this is based on a 2,000 square foot replacement home in Bonnie Doon. If you scroll down, Maggie, it gives kind of the fees. This is what they're going to be charging in terms of fees, or what they're estimating. The top piece is the fees that they will be charging. The bottom part of that are the fees that they would typically charge, but they are not going to be charging for the rebuild. And this came from the county's website. And then
Actually, that came from the County Board of Supervisors meeting a couple weeks ago, the agenda document.
So they're saying if you happen to have a loss during this particular fire crisis, then you'll save the $6,000.
Right.
As a way
for this scenario, which the scenario is laid out right above this.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And then the rest of the document, and then further down, we have key county code provisions regarding building after the fire disaster. I think we won't go through these in detail, but I think everyone can kind of go through that on their own.
That's a really important document. Just, it's what is your guiding principles, and that's what we do. We have guiding principles that help you reach your goals within the constraints that the county is expecting. So knowing code and is important. So,
and then this one's a good one from environmental planning that just has a frequently asked questions, which there's some good stuff in there. So again, people can kind of go through that on their own time. So I think that's probably good.
Yeah, if we want to open it up to any questions. I know we wanted to try and get into like specific building practices and whatnot, but there have been so much information that has come out just since the first time we did this with you that we just felt like we needed to kind of still be drilling into some of these more critical first steps, because that seems to be the conversations we're seeing on Facebook and other groups, and getting feedback from community members. So,
okay. All right. So I'm going to open it up to questions. If you're listening and you have any questions about this process, just go ahead and put it in the Q&A window. I don't see any in there off the top yet. So I'll, while I'm waiting for that, I have a question about construction. So it sounds like assuming that you can figure out all the soils, get the foundation for your house, as far as the soil ready to go, the septic ready to go, the wells, all those addressed. and now it's time to build your house. What are the criteria you guys used, you would recommend to find or select a construction company to build? What are the things to look for if there's a lot of different construction companies either contacting you or that you contact to decide who to hire? I mean, how do you
Thanks for
pick a
bringing that up,
contractor?
because that kind of goes back to consultants, that consultants page. We find that our best process in building or renovating or anything that we do is that the sooner we have a contractor on board, the better the process is, the more efficient it is, the more cost effective it is. So we always encourage our clients to hire a contract, interview and hire contractors early on in the process. We don't necessary, I mean, so there is a way, there is this sort of traditional way of like, we do the drawings and then you take the drawings and you give them to 3 contractors and 3 contractors give you bids and you choose one based on whether you liked them or the price or some criteria you've created for yourself. We feel like the sooner you have a contractor on board, the better the end result is. And so because it's a relationship, you go through that process early on. We often, even if people aren't willing to necessarily not do that, take it to 3 bid situation, we have contractor relationships that will work hourly early on to kind of work with our engineer and our design process to make sure that we are value engineering where we can and that the buildability is there, and that we're not, that we're not having to revisit things down the road during construction as much. And so what those contractors will do is they'll bill hourly potentially, and then it just kind of gets wrapped up into the overall cost of the project if you end up going with them. And so they would typically be one person that would bid it, and then if you wanted to find 2 other contractors. So that's one part that I wanted to say. The collaboration early on is really, we found instrumental in our process. The second thing is, and the team between us, your architect or designer, and your contractor and their subs, if that is a well-oiled machine, your life is going to be so much easier because it's a stressful process regardless. And if everybody's, plays well together, your life is much better. So that's one thing. The second thing is, we have had a conversation with the contractor in Bonnie Doon who has committed, had his subs, and they've all committed to like fixing their fees for the next 2 years, specifically for fire rebuild. Because what's going to happen is if things get out of control pricing wise, people aren't going to be able to afford to rebuild. And then there are people waiting to buy these properties right now. So what they're trying to do is rebuild the community. And to me, if I was hiring a contractor, I would want to hire somebody local that has been doing work here for many years and is invested in the community and really wants to rebuild. And so he went out, Stuart Craigie went out on his own, got all of his subs to like commit to holding their prices. They don't have control over material costs, unfortunately, but, and that they're committed to doing what they can to help people rebuild. And so for us, like we're looking at taking our profits from, people who are properly insured, and we're working with them and taking our profit and dumping it back into community foundation and Valley churches so that the people that are underinsured potentially have a resource. So I guess as a community member, I would say if I would be looking for that. I would be looking for that because this is a relationship. So I'd start with character and then also qualifications. If, it's important that people understand new construction and understand building in this specific area, which is complex, and have really good relationships with the county, because we're able to do what we do well because of our relationships with the county, and the builder has to have that same relationship because they're in charge of your inspections, and you have a contentious relationship with the county, it can slow things down.
Good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what about fire resistant building materials and or green building materials? Are those more expensive if you go that route, or do you think that the technology is changing and it's not as expensive as you might think?
Yeah, I don't know if it has to be more expensive. It depends on what people are choose to select for what they're using. I mean, there's going to be requirements for certain building materials for the exterior, and there's going to be certain building practices that have to be met for
Fire resistant.
that is fire resistant. So I mean, I think pretty much all these properties are in the WUI, which is the Wildland Urban Interface, and there are very specific requirements for those exterior materials and building practices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just something to talk to your architect about in terms of the different newer building materials.
And
I
again,
mean, you have basic green, green building and fire resistant code, and then as a homeowner, based on your desires and your finances, you can take it further. It's not by code that you need to have a net zero, fully fire resistant property, but it is possible to build that. It just depends on, what your resources are.
Depends on budget.
Yeah.
But again, just going back to the that's an important part of why it's about having a contractor involved early on in the process, because as the architect or designer starts to go through that design process, before fully detailing out what those materials are, it's a good idea to have that priced by a contractor to make sure it's going to be within the budget. And so if the quality of material or the type of material needs to be reduced, even though it still meets the requirements from the county, then it's good to, you want to find that out sooner on, so that you're not wasting time and money, designing something that's not going to be within the budget.
Right. That's what I was wondering, if that's going to be cost prohibitive to go that route. So, and then finally, time wise, what are we talking here? Is this a 2-year process from start to finish, or 1-year process? What should people plan on?
I think it's going to depend. I think it's going to depend on each property's circumstances. I mean, the
like and kind with septic that is up to date is going to be the quickest project. And then there's going to be everything in between. Somebody that never had any kind of documentation, nobody even knows the thing existed there, and that's going to be the longest. So, there's a lot of properties up at Last Chance and whatnot that are going to be going through a process that's a little bit more arduous.
So at the shortest, what would you say, like the ideal scenario?
I would like to say, to build.
Yeah, to get it done from
Completion.
start to finish, from now till when your construction's complete. I have no idea how long it takes to build a house. Does it take a month?
Yeah.
A year? I don't know.
I mean, let's take cleanup out of the equation, because we don't really know what the time frame is for cleanup. It's what, there's whatever the particular design process is, and that could be anywhere from maybe I'll just say 3 to 6 months, let's say, depending on what the situation is. And then going through the plan check process and the permitting process, if it is the easiest, most streamlined one, that could be I'd say a month, maybe. I mean, even though they're saying 5 to 7 days, that they'll review it, and then you're gonna plan check comments, you're gonna have to resubmit. So let's say it's a month to do that, and then whatever the construction schedule is, and that's going to be dependent on what the weather. I mean, exactly what's happening on the property, and with the rainy season, and when you're going to be able to build. So I mean, it's hard to even it's hard to even just give you a very like buttoned up time frame, because there's a lot of different variables.
Well, it sounds like a minimum of a year anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people knew that it was going to be at least a year and planned for 2, then they'll be pleasantly surprised if it's done quicker.
Okay, that works. Good, good, good. All right.
but-
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's it. Just like we have a quiet group here today. Oh, it looks like one of the questions was already answered, and we're all covered on Q&A. So you guys were very thorough. I can tell you did a lot of research between last time, even since then, and this document is extremely helpful to have all these links.
Well, and anybody, if, you know, I mean, there may be questions that are really specific to you individuals. And I know I see Chris Miller on here and Catherine, and we've spoken to them. And if you have specific questions after this, you know, reach out to us. Our contact information's on that, and we'll give you whatever information we have. Also, if you have information that you're running up against or sort of walls you're running up against, your county supervisors wanting to hear from their constituents about what's the red tape, what are the roadblocks. And so we have close relationships. If you want to share that with us, do that. I will say one other thing. If you have the time, there's Assembly Bill 187 that was passed last year in response to another fire and down south. And that assembly bill was a temporary assembly bill that allowed people to rebuild without needing to go all the way to the extreme levels of the new Title 24 requirements. And so it basically gave those people some reprieve, and that assembly bill expired in January 2020. And so I would encourage you to write a letter to Mark Stone, our assemblyman, and encourage him to lobby to reinstate that assembly bill, because there's going to be it's just one other thing along with septic that adds a price tag to the rebuilding. And if people are right there on the line with their insurance, this could be a make or break situation. So
I just put that all in the chat window. Everything that you just said about Assembly Bill 187. Thanks for sharing that. Oh, I think I accidentally shared it with you instead, Timerie, so I'm going to put it to
yeah, actually all of those links Maggie looks like they were
I think I'm just sending it to you.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand why it says private, so I'm going to share that link. I'm going to share the USGS link again, and I'm going to share the Resource Conservation Water District.
Oh no, it's not 187. Sorry.
It's the bill number. Correction, it's bill.
Hold on. Sorry, I'm looking up right now.
I'm putting the resource conservation one in there while you're looking that up. And then also I'm going to put
178. That's my dyslexia. 178. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, let's see. Correction. Bill
178.
8. Got it. And then I'm also going to share the SLV News and Events event page on Facebook, which is where all of the webinars are in this series. This one will be recorded, is being recorded, and will be posted there on the event page. And then all the past ones have been recorded. You can visit those, including part 1 of this conversation about steps to rebuild. And then we have some more coming up, and you can see those as well. And I'm going to post that link right now, the SLV News and Events page. Also, the resource conservation events are included there. There's some other things that'll be kind of mixed in there, anything that we can do to provide event information for folks affected by the fire.
In that way.
I think I dropped off for a second. Is everyone back? I'm back. Sorry, I don't even know what I hit. I got nuked. Something I said offended Zoom. Okay. So anyway, there's the SLV News and Events page. What I was saying was the next event in our series is going to be the Small Business Administration, talking about the loans that they have for homeowners who have if their homes have been lost to the fire and they need money to help rebuild. Maybe their insurance doesn't cover it. FEMA has funds available, but they want you to try to get these small business loans, Small Business Administration loans first. It's something that they are running here locally out of the Small Business Development Center. And it's federal funds that are available in the form of a loan. If you don't qualify for the loan, then there might be some FEMA funds available for you. But that's all the details about that will be in the next Zoom that we have coming up. And I think that's it for now. I'm going to sign off. And
And that next Zoom is next Thursday at 11:30.
thank you. That's what I was trying to look up when I got kicked off. Thank you, Wendy. All right. Okay, everybody. Well, thanks a lot for being here. And
Thank you.
thanks, Timerie. Thanks a lot
Bye.
for
Bye, thank
the research, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
All right. Thank you for
Bye.
having us.
Bye.
Bye.